Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Becerra, do your policies at ORR place priority on speedy placement of the unaccompanied child with sponsors or taking care of their safety and protection once they've been placed?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. The safety and well-being of children in our custody is our #1 priority.
Well, so that's important to know because your record indicates that biometrics for the sponsors were eased up there. The use of DNA, I'm going to read from your directive from March 22nd, 2021. Use of DNA is only used for the purpose of establishing biological relationships for purposes of sponsorship and is not submitted to law enforcement personnel or run against law enforcement databases. Catch that last part? Not submitted to law enforcement personnel and not run against law enforcement databases. And to get this part, submission of DNA by the parent is voluntary. How in the world does that protect the child, the unaccompanied minor, when actually what you're doing is you're saying the parent, whether you submit the DNA, that's voluntary. So you're going to be taking whoever it is, the sponsor, their word. So how does that protect the child?
Chairman, thank you for the question. We use a number of tools to make sure we can identify the child and certainly do the background checks on anyone who wishes to be a sponsor. We always hope that we can get the most direct information about the the people who are wishing to sponsor these children. And we use, as you mentioned, a number of techniques, including fingerprinting and DNA on occasion when it helps us to identify
on occasion. And if you don't have the DNA and you don't have the fingerprints, how in the world are you checking the databases for the background? How are you vetting them?
We have a number of techniques that we use to make sure we're
What are they?
They can include any number of things such as, sometimes it will include fingerprints, it will include a direct interview with the individual, it will be a check on citizenship documents, it will be a
How often do you use fingerprinting or DNA?
Again, it depends on the type of information we have to identify the individuals who are wishing to sponsor.
So let's read this one here. This is from Directive 10 days later, March 31st, 2021. Effective immediately, background check requirements for adult household members and alternate adult caregivers identified in a sponsor care plan are not required as a condition of release under any Category 2. So it's not required all the time, right? It's just it's voluntary for DNA for parents. So how can you say that your #1 priority is the safety of these unaccompanied children when you're placing them in sponsors' homes that, in an occasion, have had criminal gang affiliations because there's been no proper background check? How can you say that?
Congressman, if you follow child welfare best practices, you do an extensive background check. We follow child welfare best practices, so we do those extensive background checks, which could include any number of things.
So how did it happen? I've got this report I'd like to submit to the record. This is Senator Grassley's report.
Without objection.
How did we see children end up in the homes of MS-13 gang members as the sponsor? How'd that happen?
Congressman, I don't have any information before me that you're referencing, but what I can tell you is that no sponsor would be allowed to take a child if we have information that shows that they are engaged in criminal activity.
But if you don't do the vetting right, you don't know if they're engaged in criminal activity. That's how you end up with an MS-13 gang member as the sponsor. That's how you end up with pedophiles getting 20 children in the same home. That's how you end up there because the vetting's been crappy. I mean, that's the bottom line. So if we go on and we get to this other aspect where you say the emphasis is on safety, not speed, I'm going to read to you now the memo of concern filed in July of 2021. And the reason I read this, even though it's dated somewhat, it seems to be still the conditions. This is from page 2. Since the beginning of this current influx, ORR field staff have seen the transformation of the Division of Unaccompanied Children's Operations within ORR from a child welfare focus model to one that emphasizes what seems to be, quote, release to someone as soon as possible, close quote model, close quote. So I know you've lost contact with these children, and now we're told that when you lose contact with these children, it's not being lost, but it is being lost. I ask for all of these to be included in the record, Mr. Chairman.